Sena was a young woman who had grown up in a small village. Her father had been a respected man, and his best friend, Mr. Musa, was a frequent visitor to their home. Sena's father's health deteriorated after their home was taken by the bank. He then passed away. Mr. Musa initially stepped in, offering support and guidance during their most vulnerable time. However, the situation soon worsened, and Sena and her mother were forced to leave the city and return to the village. Struggling to make ends meet, Sena had to drop out of school to assist her mother, who began selling vegetables to sustain them. The crushing weight of poverty bore down heavily on them, leaving them in a state of despair and uncertainty about their future. "We need to talk," Sena's mum said. "I know, Mum." Sena listened as she dropped everything she was doing. "Things are getting worse. We barely have enough to eat, and the rent is overdue. I don't know how much longer we can go on like this. I've been thinking, maybe we should ask Mr. Musa for help again. I know we didn't want to, but we don't have any other options." "Not Mr. Musa again. Is there no other option like your relatives, Mum?" "No, my child. He is the only option. Remember, he was a very good friend of your father." With no other options, they turned to Mr. Musa for help once again. "Mr. Musa, we need your help. We're struggling to make ends meet, and I don't know what else to do." Mr. Musa listened as he drank his whiskey, his expression unreadable. "I see. But this time, I have a condition. I will only help you if Sena agrees to marry me." "What?" "That's a big decision, but she's still young. Those are my terms. Take it or leave it," he commanded. "I will speak to her, and we will come back to you." She quickly stood up from the chair and left feeling defeated. Later, Sena's mother returns home to deliver the news. "Sena, I spoke to Mr. Musa. He said he will help us, but only if you agree to marry him." "Marry him? But, Mom, that's such a huge decision. I don't even know him that well. I mean, he's my father's age mate." "No, I can't, Mom. I'm sorry I can't do that." "I know, dear, but what choice do we have? We're barely surviving as it is. This could be our only way out of poverty." "Mom, please, let me think about it." "Think about it, my child." Faced with the overwhelming burden of poverty, Sena had no choice but to agree as her chest ached. This is the price she had to pay for her family. She married Mr. Musa, hoping that it would bring some relief to her family's struggles. Life with Mr. Musa was far from what Sena had hoped. He was abusive and controlling, leaving her feeling trapped and isolated. He would threaten to feed his workers to his bulldogs each time they disobeyed him. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Sena found solace in reading the Bible, but only when Mr. Musa wasn't at home. He despised her praying, going to church, or even reading the Bible. Whenever he caught her, he would sneer, "You belong to me. I've been providing for you since the death of your father. Your family owes me." Sena's days were filled with fear and loneliness. She clung to her faith in secret, finding brief moments of peace in the words of the Bible. But Mr. Musa's oppressive presence loomed over her, constantly reminding her of her helplessness. "I don't want you calling that name," he would snap. "It gives me a headache." The weight of his words and actions bore down on her, making her feel like a prisoner in her own home. Sena's hope for a better life had turned into a nightmare, and she struggled to find a way out of the darkness that surrounded her. Mr. Musa didn't allow Sena to go anywhere. The only person permitted to visit was her mother. The house help often gossiped with the gateman, wondering why Sena never left the house. They couldn't comprehend the strict confinement she was under. One day, when Sena's mother came to visit, Sena saw a glimmer of hope. She had been waiting for a moment like this to share the torment she had been enduring. As they sat in the small, dimly lit living room, Sena's voice trembled as she began to speak. "Mom, I need to tell you something about Mr. Musa," she said, her eyes filled with desperation. Her mother leaned in, sensing the gravity of the situation. "What is it, Sena? What's wrong?" Her mother's eyes widened with shock and concern. "Oh, my dear Sena, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was afraid, Mom. I didn't want to burden you, and I felt trapped with no way out," Sena replied, tears streaming down her face. Her mother took her hand and squeezed it tightly. "We'll find a way, Sena. We won't let this go on any longer. You deserve to be free and safe." As Sena clung to her mother's words, she felt a flicker of hope. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but with her mother's support, She believed they could find a way to escape the nightmare that had become her life with Mr. Musa. Though faced with overwhelming challenges, Sena and her mother began to search for a way out of their dire situation, determined to find a path to freedom and a better life. Their resilience and unwavering bond give them the strength to keep fighting, no matter how difficult the journey ahead may be. One day, as Sena was cleaning the house to pass the time, her boredom led her to explore corners she usually ignored. In the dim light of the storage room, her eyes fell on an old, dusty bag tucked away in a forgotten corner. Something about it felt off, and a shiver ran down her spine as she hesitated. Curiosity, however, got the better of her, and with trembling hands, she pulled the bag into the light. The weight of the bag felt heavier than it should, and as she unzipped it, her heart pounded in her chest. She braced herself, unsure of what she might find. Inside, she uncovered a bottle, its glass fogged and eerie. But what truly made her gasp was what lay within the bottle, a picture of her family, tied up with a red string. The sight was chilling, and a wave of dread washed over her. "Jesus!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling as she stumbled back, clutching the bag. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had just uncovered. The image of her family, bound in such a sinister way, sent her heart into overdrive. Sena's hands shook as she realized the significance of what she had discovered. This was no ordinary find. It was something dark, something that hinted at secrets she had never imagined. The room seemed to close in around her as the weight of the discovery pressed heavily on her chest. As Sena stared at the chilling sight of the bottle with her family photo tied in red string, she couldn't stop the questions racing through her mind. Why is Mr. Musa doing this? What does he want from me? The more she thought, the more a dreadful suspicion began to form. Her breath quickened as memories of her father flooded back. How life had seemed perfect before everything fell apart. Mr. Musa and her father had once been friends, or so her father had believed. Musa had introduced himself as a trusted advisor, someone with connections that could help grow the family business. One fateful day, he brought investors to her father's business, claiming they could turn it into an empire. Blinded by ambition and trust, her father agreed, pouring everything into the deal. But it was all a sham. The investors disappeared with the money, leaving the business bankrupt. The betrayal crushed her father, and the mounting stress of the financial ruin took a heavy toll on his health. It wasn't long before he succumbed to a heart attack, leaving Sena and her mother devastated and struggling to survive. Now, with the picture in the bottle in her hands, the truth hit Sena like a ton of bricks. Mr. Musa, she thought, her hands trembling. He had been behind it all, the downfall of her father, their descent into poverty, and their dependence on him. He had orchestrated their suffering, ensuring they would have no choice but to turn to him for help. The betrayal ran far deeper than she could have ever imagined. The bottle was no ordinary object. It was a symbol of his control, a dark and sinister reminder of how he had manipulated and trapped them in his web of lies. Sena's heart pounded as rage and anguish consumed her. The man she had been forced to marry, the one who claimed he was saving her family, had been their greatest enemy all along. She gripped the bottle tightly, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't sure what she would do next, but one thing was certain. She couldn't allow Mr. Musa to keep his hold over her any longer. She knew she will take everything he had stolen from his father and will use one thing he treasured most, his bulldogs. Sena's discovery of the bag and the sinister contents inside marked the beginning of a quiet rebellion that burned within her. She didn't tell her mother, partly because she wanted to shield her from the gravity of what she had found, and partly because she knew this was a fight she had to face on her own. Sena began to plan her escape with a quiet precision. She knew Mr. Musa's routine by heart, his habits, his temper, his weaknesses. Every day, she acted as though nothing had changed. She served his meals, responded to his snarling insults with a bowed head, and even pretended to be dutiful while inside her heart raged like a storm. But in the silence of her days, she prepared herself. She started setting aside small things, a little money here, a few essential items there. She took note of where he kept important documents and studied the keys hanging from his belt when he wasn't looking. The workers at Mr. Musa's estate took turns feeding the dogs daily. The routine was rigid, with each staff member assigned a specific day to ensure the fierce animals were well fed and alert. Sena observed this carefully, knowing that the dogs were one of Mr. Musa's key defenses against the outside world and her potential escape. Every day, she watched as the workers came and went, and she made mental notes about the dogs' habits and the times they were fed. As she practiced patience, Sena reminded herself that one wrong move could unravel everything. She endured Mr. Musa's cruel words, his sneering remarks about her dependency on him, and his constant reminders that he owned her. Every insult stung, but she swallowed her pride, keeping her expression calm even as her inner fire burned brighter. She told herself over and over again that her time was coming. Her plan had to start with the dogs. They were aggressive and well-trained, their sharp barks enough to intimidate anyone who came near. But Sena knew she needed them distracted, and so she devised a subtle strategy. Each time it was her turn to help feed them, or when she was near the workers, she added something small to their meals, a harmless ingredient at first, designed to increase their appetite. Over time, the dogs began to eat more voraciously, their hunger seemingly insatiable. The workers noticed but shrugged it off, thinking it was just the animals adjusting to their routine. "These dogs act like they've never been fed," one of them joked to the gateman one afternoon. Sena simply listened, keeping her face neutral as she continued her careful plan. The dogs grew increasingly preoccupied with their food, their focus shifting entirely to their next meal. With their appetites heightened, they became less alert to their surroundings, exactly as Sena had intended. Step by step, Sena laid the groundwork for her escape, knowing that the dogs were the first obstacle she had to overcome. Her patience and determination grew stronger with each passing day, even as Mr. Musa's oppressive presence loomed over her. The plan was set in motion, and she vowed to see it through, no matter the risk. Darkness could not hold her forever, and she was ready to fight her way back into the light. One night, she began digging into Mr. Musa's locked drawers while he was out. She found receipts, contracts, and evidence of fraudulent deals he had conducted. As she pieced together his financial webs, the truth became clearer. This man hadn't just ruined her father, he had swindled countless others. The darkness he harbored extended far beyond her family. Sena carefully gathered a few key pieces of evidence and tucked them away in her hiding spot. Sena knew she had everything she needed. The evidence, the plan, and her determination were all perfectly aligned. When Mr. Musa announced he would be traveling for a week, she saw her opportunity. After leaving, she instructed the gateman and driver to take a week off, reassuring them with rare kindness. Sena told them, "I won't need anyone. I'll pick up my husband at the airport myself. I want to surprise him," she told the driver with a practiced smile. Overjoyed, the workers left, grateful for a break they had never received before. With Mr. Musa gone, Sena quietly put her final steps into motion. She was left alone with the house help, who remained unaware of her intentions. On the second day, Sena staged her escape. Pretending to trip on the steps, she let out an ear-piercing scream. The house help rushed to find her lying at the bottom of the stairs, clutching her side as though in agony. "Call an ambulance!" Sena groaned, tears streaming down her face. As she was rushed to the hospital, Sena ensured she carried the damning evidence against Mr. Musa tightly in her hands. When the house help expressed worry, Sena forced a weak smile. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. You take care of the house until I'm back," she reassured the woman, masking the turmoil in her heart. Lying in the hospital bed later that evening, Sena took one final step to ensure Mr. Musa's evil deeds would come to light. She mailed the final letter to the authorities, attaching the original contracts she had stolen from his private files. Every detail of his crimes was meticulously documented, leaving no room for escape. With the evidence delivered, all she could do was wait. Back at the mansion, chaos was brewing. The house help, preoccupied with household chores and errands, forgot to feed Mr. Musa's prize dogs. Days passed without food, and the animals grew increasingly aggressive and ravenous. On the seventh day, Mr. Musa returned from his trip, annoyed to find no one waiting to pick him up at the airport. Frustration boiled over as he tried calling his driver, only to discover his phone was switched off. Fuming, he had no choice but to take a taxi home, the inconvenience only adding to his irritation. He then called Sena, who told him she was in hospital. His anger spilled out. He shouted over the phone, demanding to know why no one had arranged for his pickup, completely ignoring her condition. His tirade was all about him, his missed welcome, his disrupted plans, showing not a sliver of concern for her well-being. Sena silently endured his verbal assault, the cold realization of his selfishness solidifying her resolve. After he hung up, she mumbled under her breath, her eyes fiery with determination, "You just don't know what's coming for you, Musa. With this evidence, no one can stop me now." When Mr. Musa arrived at the mansion, an unsettling silence greeted him. The absence of the gateman and driver, paired with the empty halls devoid of activity, filled him with unease. He called out, but only his voice echoed back. The heavy air hung like a forewarning, and panic started to creep into his chest. His thoughts turned quickly to his prized dogs, the only living creatures he trusted to guard his kingdom of lies. Without hesitation, he hurried through the quiet mansion toward the room where the dogs were kept. The tension was suffocating as he reached the door. He swung it open in one swift motion, and his heart nearly stopped at the sight that greeted him. Starved and agitated, the dogs surged forward, their eyes wild with hunger. Before he could react, they lunged at him in a violent frenzy. One dog clamped its powerful jaws onto his leg, dragging him to the ground, while another locked onto his arm with a savage grip. Musa's screams filled the room, his cries a chaotic symphony of pain and terror. He thrashed and fought, but the strength of the ravenous animals overpowered him. The very creatures he had trusted turned into harbingers of his downfall, exacting an unrelenting vengeance. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, the world was ablaze with breaking news exposing Mr. Musa's fraudulent empire. The authorities, alerted by Sena's carefully planned evidence, were already en route. As they pulled up to the gates, the muffled sounds of his tortured screams reached them, guiding them to the horrific scene. When the officers burst into the room, they were greeted by a sight of unspeakable horror. Mr. Musa lay helpless, mauled by the very creatures he had used to assert his dominance. His own darkness had come back to claim him in the most gruesome of ways. The police could do nothing but witness the end of a man consumed by his own evil. It was too late to save him. His deeds had sealed his fate. The darkness he had sown for years finally caught up with him in the most brutal and ironic of ways. The mansion, once a fortress of his power, now bore witness to his downfall, a grim testament that evil ultimately devours itself. The news of Mr. Musa's downfall spread like wildfire, igniting conversations in every corner of the estate and beyond. Headlines screamed of his treachery, how he had swindled people out of their wealth and destroyed the destiny of his best friend in the process. His betrayal and greed, once hidden behind a mask of respectability, were now exposed for all to see. From marketplaces to church gatherings, whispers and gasps filled the air as people recounted the horrifying details, including the gruesome fate that befell him. The story of the man who once wielded power and influence had become a cautionary tale of arrogance, deceit, and its ultimate consequences. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sena lay in her bed, her body weary but her spirit unburdened. The soft hum of the television filled the room, carrying the breaking news of Mr. Musa's exposed crimes. As she listened, her lips curled into a bittersweet smile, a smile that carried the weight of both relief and sorrow. For the first time in years, the oppressive weight of fear had lifted from her chest. The tormentor who had stolen her family's livelihood, shattered her world, and kept her in chains was no more. The scars of her ordeal, both physical and emotional, remained, but they no longer held her back. Justice had found its way, bringing light to the darkness that had overshadowed her life for so long. In that moment, Sena felt a quiet triumph, proof that no matter how overwhelming the shadows may seem, they can never stand against the piercing brilliance of truth and courage. She closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek, knowing that a new chapter awaited her, one filled with hope, freedom, and the chance to rebuild. Sena's quiet reliance on her faith throughout her ordeal shows the importance of holding on to hope, even in the darkest of times. Her faith gave her the strength to endure and the clarity to act. With a deep sense of relief, Sena closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The nightmare was over, and she was finally free to begin anew. Mr. Musa's reign of terror had ended, and his legacy was reduced to a stark reminder that evil, no matter how powerful it seems, cannot prevail in the face of light and resilience. This story reminds us that perseverance, truth, and justice illuminate even the darkest paths, and that light will always overcome shadow. Evil does not prevail. Mr. Musa's fate serves as a reminder that deceit, greed, and exploitation will eventually be exposed. Darkness cannot coexist with light, and those who engage in malicious acts are ultimately held actions, driven by greed and betrayal, not only destroyed others' lives but also led to his own downfall.